Every year, 40 million people suffer from stress or anxiety of some shape or form, according to Harvard. And if you're not careful, those bad health diagnoses, the divorce, the stress, it can spiral, and it can often sabotage your future. So I'm going to share with you my story of how I overcame stress and anxiety on a massive scale from business trauma. I'm talking about death threats and lawsuits, and how I learned to dream again. And I'm going to share with you my tips on how I overcame all of the trauma. I'm going to share with you how to ask yourself what-if questions in those difficult moments, and master the art of focus. Focus on the right things, and you too can learn to dream again. So I was a CEO of a software company, my own software company. In 2020, we had millions of dollars of revenue. We had clients all over the world. We had one client, we had a team in Nashville, a team in India, and a team in London. We were doing millions of dollars of revenue. Billions of client dollars flowed through our systems every year. And one thing happened that was so unexpected that changed everything in 2 seconds. And I discovered that we had been hacked. And a hacker from Vietnam had broken into our software systems and stolen 250,000 credit card numbers. Not $250,000, 250,000 credit card numbers worth an estimated $1.5 billion. And as you can imagine, that caused a giant tidal wave of enormous fear that led to ultimately to stress, and then ultimately to depression. And in that moment, things felt hopeless. And I don't know if you've ever been stressed out of your mind. That's literally how I felt in that moment. And for me, just when you think it can get worse, it gets worse. Why? 2/3 of my staff quit. My business partner left. Clients were leaving by the dozens. Revenues were falling off a cliff, and my legal bills were piling up. And in that moment, it just felt hopeless. And so just when you think it can get worse, we got a knock on our door. Uniformed police officer served me papers, a lawsuit, which will become one of many, many lawsuits. And just when you couldn't think it would get worse, a client in Nashville threatened to murder my team. Why? This didn't just affect me and my clients, it affected my clients and their customers. You see, our client was the merchant, the online merchant selling online. And we were storing our clients' customer credit card numbers, and this affected hundreds of thousands of their customers. And in that moment, my crisis management team shared a little nugget with me that I want to share with you today. And they asked me one very powerful question. They said, what if? What if? What if this wasn't credit card numbers? What if this was birthdays and social security numbers? As you guys may know, that is identity theft, and that can haunt someone the rest of their life. You don't just go get another credit card in 5 to 7 business days like you would a credit card. And so the first thing that I learned that I want to share with you, for those of you taking notes, is ask yourself what-if questions. So what I want you guys to ask yourself now, in the heaviness that you may feel now, is what if? What if the situation you're in right now, what if it's just temporary? Now, a lot of times we have this heaviness that we deal with, and we have to have the correct perspective. And a lot of times it's not the things that we extract, it's not the situation, it's the things, the meaning we extract from the situation. For me, it was the things I told myself. Failure, loser. And if I wanted proof or evidence that was a ginormous screw up, this is a pretty good proof, right? So I had to learn to outrun that identity that I had given myself. And like most of you, I internalized the problem. Like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't doing the things right. And so for me, what I had to do was I had to shift my focus. And one of the things I want you guys to think about for those of you taking notes, is how do you master the art of focus? See, a lot of times we focus on things we don't control, things we can't control, right? So when all this was happening 2 weeks before Christmas, my 8 and 10-year-old came home and said, "I don't like Daddy. He's always angry." See, not only did it affect my finances, my business, like all aspects, and my wife tells me I'm no fun to be with, and I need to consider separating. And if you're not careful in those delicate moments, it's very easy to enter that negative spiral. Some of you know what I'm talking about, where you just grow numb and cold to life, or you just don't care about anything. You have to be very, very careful. And so what do? How do you ask yourself these what-if questions? How do you reimagine your reality? So I've been to Vegas many, many times, and from the ground level, from the sidewalk, those hotels, when you look up, they look massive, right? Sometimes those hotels are also symbolic of our problems. From the ground level, they look huge. They look massive. A few years ago, I got to take a flight over the Vegas Strip from an elevated perspective. And from the elevated perspective, those hotels look a little smaller, right? They almost look like little Lego blocks out on the horizon. And so for our team, what we had to do is we had to work through these things. We had to learn to focus on the right things. A lot of times we focus on things we can't control. We have to shift our focus from the past to the future. And so one of the things that I want you guys to think about is a lot of times people are so focused, like I was, on the pain and the heaviness and the situation, this thing that happened. And this is the rearview mirror. That represents your past, right? Most of us, when we have trauma, guess what we focus on? The past. But I want to encourage you to think about the big windshield of your future that's literally right in front of you. For me, I was missing amazing opportunities. Why? Because I was focused on the pain. I was focused on the heaviness. And a common sense thought occurred to me in all this. Instead of focusing on this giant pile of crap, maybe I should start looking for a shovel. And so that became this turnaround point for me where I began to look at the things that are in front of me and focus on the future. Now, the trauma, the heaviness, those are part of your story. That's scarring, that's always going to be with you, right? So what I want you to remember is where you're going is always more important than where you are, right? Like the past is behind you, it's done, can't change it, but going forward. And so for me, I had to think about, where do I go from here in the middle of this situation? Where do I go? And so for me, I had to think about, what is this? How do I shift from old to new? And being a software guy, it became kind of obvious. I had to shift from a 2.0 version of myself to 3.0, right? I had to do a major upgrade, hardware and software. Hardware, of course, being my physical body, software being my operating system, my mindset, the way I think about things, right? And for most of you, the way you process information, the way you view situations, all of that flows through your operating system. So I had to learn to upgrade my hardware and my software. So for those of you curious, how do you do that? I ran a 5K, signed up for a 5K, then a half marathon, then I got crazy. Half Ironman, then full distance Ironman. Took me 14 hours to complete the full. For my mindset, I had to start listening to podcasts. I had to reset. I started reading books. I started listening to motivational speakers. And I had to get out of the old focus, shift from the past to the new, the past to the present. And so the question is it time for an upgrade for you? If you're in this moment, are you ready for an upgrade? So the easiest thing I like to do, I do this all the time. I recommend it for every single one of you. This thing I call a 90-minute power walk. A 90-minute power walk. I do these multiple times a day sometimes. So imagine if you just get away from all the technology. Just get out in nature, get your running shoes, your walking shoes. You're not running. This is literally available to anyone. regardless of your fitness level, regardless of your financial situation, we could all go for a 90-minute walk. So what do you think about on the 90-minute walk? Well, what if you had some time set aside, and what if you could get clear on your future, get clear on what you want? How do you do that? Well, imagine if there's your relationships, your finances, your career, like your personal life. Like, what if you took one 90-minute slot and thought about each one of these things? Could you get clear on what you want? Now, if you did this once a week for a month, that's 6 hours, right? If you did it once a week for a whole year, that's 72 hours. And you're able to set aside time, get away from the technology, just focus, just you in nature, right? You can kind of shift from this old to this new. And so the third thing that I learned was I have to smile every day. Now, for me, I'm super, super practical. So what do? You buy a puppy, of course, right? Pay attention, guys. If you're ever stressed, like I needed something to be happy, I need to laugh every day. I need to smile every day, even if it's just for a few minutes before I walk out the door, right? Now, I'm not suggesting you guys buy a puppy. Let's not get crazy. But some of you guys already have one. And those of you who don't, if you're ever feeling stressed or anxious, I recommend you call the local puppy store and you ask for an emergency puppy cuddle session. That's right, write that down. You don't want to come home with 2 pit bulls. An emergency puppy cuddle session. You think this works? Absolutely works. And so through all this process, it's a journey. What are the updates? What happened? Well, after years of rebuilding the company, I ended up growing it and we were more profitable than ever. And some investors offered me millions of dollars, and not a total idiot. I accepted and I sold the company. So, excellent. Yep. My wife and I rededicated our vows on the beach, Vero Beach, not too far from here in Florida. A few friends of I started a nonprofit a few years ago where we're raising money for funds and causes that are important to us. I ended up writing a book, like all kinds of things shifted. Now, what I want to encourage you guys is knowing what I went through and knowing that most of you probably aren't starting with $1.5 billion hole in the ground where your company used to be, like I did. If I can do it, you can too, right? So this is what I want to leave you guys with. There's no passion to be found in playing small, in settling for a life that's less than the one you're capable of living. Do you guys believe that? Yeah. One of the things I want, for those of you who are over 40, I want you to think about is a lot of times we have dreams that are buried below many, many feet of bedrock. We'll call that doubt and disbelief. And we need to dig those dreams up, we need to dust them off, and we need to get to work. So maybe it's time to shift from the old to the new. Maybe it's time to focus and shift from that past to this new. Maybe it's time for this major upgrade. Maybe it's time to schedule some power walks. What would happen if you ask yourself those what-if questions? What if you focused on the right things, you mastered the art of focus? And what if you smiled every day? Could you make a difference in your own life? I had the courage to chase my dreams. Do you have the courage to chase yours? Sure, you may fail, but what if you fly? Thank you.